Hey, Internet, because Bushy decided that there always had to be a Stargate clan in Tier 4. Here's Deletors.
Yeah, I think unfortunately Link Joker was the worst deck to come out of ILS Deleter. Like, worse than Pale Moon, actually. Um, this deck this deck has a lot of things that actually frustrate me about it because there's, like, actually some really good cards in this deck. But just, like, the whole way that it was designed is very clunky, in my opinion. Uh, like, there's a lot of issues with this, but we'll get into it. Here's your starter. You can choose between this or Micro Edge Draco Kid, or Micro Hole Draco Kid. I just like this because it's Deletors, and I like Deletors.
But Micro Hole Draco Kid has a Micro Hole.
I don't care. Here are 4 copies of Grayan. It's preferably your first ride of the game. He's okay. You can Counterblast 2 and delete your opponent's Vanguard. For some reason this isn't once per turn, so I guess theoretically you could use it twice if you want to waste 2 Counterblasts. Fun fact.
I mean, what if they superior ride right after you do it?
I don't know anything that can do that.
I'm sure they'll come out with something.
Counterblast.
Not just future proofing, future idiot proofing.
Counterblast 2 is a very hefty cost. I mean, and Delete itself is kind of just power crept out by just like V-Era being V-Era with encouraging rewriting and 10k triggers.
I mean, Delete is always supposed to be an aggressive effect, so it's still perfectly aggressive. It doesn't have any of the defensive cachet that it had when it originally came out, but that's long, long gone.
The other issue, too, about this being Counterblast 2 is this deck is not very good at resource generation and recovery, so, like, oftentimes it's easy just to play around this card. The second effect is actually okay. I mean, it's on hit, but it does give you a bind. Like, there's as much as to say this. You play this card because you don't have any other options outside from, like, you know, Cyber Dragons, which are a very completely different thing, but meh.
It's sad that this deck isn't going to get supported ever again.
Yeah, I love Deletors too. You got 4 copies of Gradle. It's not bad. First effect is your opponent's rear guards cannot move from circles.
Which is weird.
Outside
it's
of
not
like
a bad thing to have put on the card, but I just don't know why.
outside of like stopping the Murakumo dude and like Trident Shooter from Aquaforce, I mean, I don't know. I guess this says to your opponents, play a card and keep it there. But, like, I've hardly ever seen that really become relevant. Second effect is what you buy this card for. It's, when placed, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose an opponent's rear guard, bind it, so it's a guaranteed bind, unlike everything else, it's on hit. And if you roll it on a grade 3, delete your opponent's Vanguard. And this unit gains a crit.
I'm a little sad that everything that binds is on hit.
Yeah. It's also a shame that, like, Link Joker just doesn't have a good ride target, to be honest. Because, like, you have Gradle, who's mediocre as a first ride, and then you have this, which, like, is meant to be a finisher. But if it doesn't finish, then you're kind of stuck on something vanilla. But, you know. Gradle
Honestly,
does...
I think, like, 50% of the deck's problems would be solved if Grayon was just Counterblast 1.
Yeah. Or if we had a better countercharger. Okay, one of the actually better cards. We have Swift Deleter Gaily. When placed, if you have more rear guards than your opponent, this unit gets 4k, so it becomes a beat stick, I suppose. Also, Vanguard or rear guard, when its attack hits, you can Soul Blast 1, choose an opponent's rear guard, bind it. If your opponent doesn't have anything to bind, you could draw a card, so... This is actually some solid...
On paper, an amazing card. Only problem is...
On hit.
Yeah.
I mean, you could throw this thing down early game and get some traction off it, but... I mean, overall it's solid. It's better than some of your other grade 2 options. Then we play the twins at 2 copies each. You only really need to see them once because one calls the other from the drop zone, but again, they're so goddamn specific. And sort of restrict a lot of the create. And because one requires the other to be on the field to get its additional effect, it restricts a lot of your.
It's just so
lines of play.
uncomfortable. Why did they do it like that?
Well, the reason I play them is because it's one of the few ways that Link Joker actually gets a +1. So, Elbow here gets 4K when you have Elbow here. When it attacks the Vanguard, it's okay. Then when Elbow is placed, you can Superior Call this from the drop zone for a Soul Blast. Honestly, with how valuable Counter Blast is, this is the one you want to Superior Call. This guy will Superior Call himself from the drop zone when he's placed for a Counter Blast, which, because of this little shit, is a hard resource to get in this deck. And then even the effect he gets when you have Elro on is on hit. It's an on hit bind for a Counter Blast. Like, this one is...
I just find it funny that this guy does literally everything both of them could do.
Yeah. So, 2 is enough. You see it. You can if you ride it, you can Soul Blast it out. 3 copies of Given. It's sort of your win condition of the deck. I always go back and forth between 3 or 4, but I settle on 3 just to be able to fit some of the other grade 2s and grade 1s. Given's good, but oftentimes if you do not win the game on Given, you will lose.
You die.
Because Given is a -5.
Technically he's a -3.
So, be careful with how you use this card and make sure you time him right.
In Premium, he's a -2.
Remember, you can do a lot of shit with him. For grade 1s, 4 copies of Drown. Because he helps fix your soul, which is nice. And he binds Soften at something, so that offers some control. And he countercharges. But wait, he only countercharges when there's no face-up cards in your damage zone. Which is such an unnecessary restriction for a deck that already has a difficult time generating resources.
You know, I wouldn't mind that so much if his timing weren't so specific.
Yeah.
Just because you have 2 options to delete. One of them is on ride, so you can't set up alongside him. The other one is 2 counterblasts, so you have to have the 2 counterblasts available to countercharge in the first place.
Like, the only other countercharge that Link Joker got is Cyber Dragon specifically, so you have to run this guy. I mean, he's not a terrible card, it's just... I wish there were better grade 3s that deleted. Actually, one of the best cards we got in this set. A lot of clans would kill for something like this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Opener of the Dark Gate, 4 of. For a simple Soul Blast, if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, you can look at the top 2 cards of the deck, Superior Call 1 from among them.
I don't know why they got this, especially because, like you said, there are about 1 million clans that are more tied to Spirit Calling that would absolutely murder for something like this. And it has nothing to do with the themes. It's also a completely random unit.
I mean, I love it because this deck really does have a difficult time maintaining any kind of board presence to actually do any kind of pressure. So you need to play this at 4 because you need to get as many quote-unquote...
You also need to play it at 4 because it's amazing.
Yeah. You need to get as many quote-unquote free calls as possible because honestly the twins are not very good, so...
It's not even quote-unquote. It just is.
Like, play this at 4.
Soul is not a resource for this deck.
Play this at 4. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't. 3 copies of Gayan. I mean, he's alright. He helps you filter, and he can bind a grade 1 or less rear guard. He's still a -1 on your side, which this deck has a very tough time justifying as a cost, but again, that's just me. So yeah, I like to run this card because it's a solid control option, I guess. And at least I get an attack with him before I have to retire him for the cost, so, you know. What else you can run, man?
Those good cards he got in the set? Oh, wait.
I mean, this guy's not half bad. If Link Joker just had a better way to get +1s. This guy's a good control option, probably one of your best control option. He binds a column. The problem is you have to retire another rear guard, so you don't oftentimes...
And he also when placed.
Yeah.
The issue with columns is that V-Series has made them so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because Excel just runs around pissing on the idea that if Force wants to, it can just play unboosted the entire game.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't think there's really too many other options you could run in place of this guy. Like, the grade 1 lineup is where most of your control comes from in this deck. for a deck that doesn't control very well, despite being built around control. So, you know, this guy will come in handy occasionally, but you don't often use him that much. Trigger lineup, 4 heal, 6 draws, because this deck desperately needs to draw into resources, and given is a thing. And if you couldn't tell, 6 crit. I tried 8 crit. Didn't get enough resources to make this deck work. 6 crit has improved the consistency, or 6 crit, 6 draws improved the consistency a little bit. But honestly, I don't think it would be that crazy to want to go to a draw. But for now, this is the trigger lineup I like. That's the deck. As you can see by a lot of my, tone in doing this profile, the deck has issues. Like, on a really good day, it could be somewhat playable. But, like, a lot of times, with the way it's just designed, many things can go wrong. Especially because you don't have a very good first ride grade 3 target.
I feel so bad for this deck, because coming out of the box, it looked like it was going to be, like, moderately strong. And then they just never gave it any support in any of the upcoming sets that had, like, Joker in it. And it's...
Yeah, because, like,
it's
Brandt
totally underperformed, and then it's just like, aw, why do you even bother with them, then?
Yeah, it's almost like they try to balance this deck too much, to, like, the point where they ignored exactly what it needed to be playable. And kind of just gave us, like, this...
Well, the problem is they went for way too many just, like, porno cards. Like, stuff like this shit. You see it and you're like, ooh, that's... In this case, that's fun, and ooh, that's flashy, but it just, there's no substance to it.
Yeah, it's like, you see this, you're like, oh my god, that's so good. And then you realize
90% of the situations, it's not going to be of any help whatsoever.
Like, if it gained power, that would have been tremendous, too. But the fact that it doesn't means that you have to allocate those force markers onto the Vanguard to make it even a little bit threatening for your given plays.
And the issue is, if you're up against something with Protect, it just sits there and needs to Given. But Given is such a double-edged sword that...
And, like, I even said about V-Series sort of making power creeping delete is the fact that you have these V-Series triggers, which means that because those force markers have to be allocated to the Vanguard, a lot of your columns can be guarded with a simple 15 to 20k, which is also the case with most other decks. So
that is why cards like him sort of do play well, because if you're still swinging above 20, they still need to guard for 2.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know. I just wish Bushiroad gave us more, but for Deletor fans out there, this is what we have to deal with, so... I don't know. Good, bad matchups.
Honestly, they should have had something like Blast Monk and the Thundering Foot right out the gate. This should have never been a thing. This should have been essentially exactly like it was in the original series, instead of this.
I mean, in terms of future sets, I don't know how it can improve Deletors specifically. Like,
Well, that's if they support Deletors at all.
I suppose Greedle is generic enough that you could throw him into, like, Brandt or something. I don't know.
Why would you want to, though?
Because deleting is fun. But, like...
Yeah, but that implies you're going to be playing aggressively enough in Brandt.
Yeah, which you won't. I mean...
The whole idea of Brandt is just to tank up long enough for your opponent to kill themselves with their own triggers.
Good, bad matchups. I suppose this does well against anything that doesn't have more than 4 rideable cards. They can... So, Golden Beast Hammer, Danitarian. Like, what's funny...
Annoys the fuck out of Danitarian.
What's funny is
Genesis probably also hates it.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's mildly annoyed. I think I've done okay against Great Nature with this.
Well, because most Genesis decks like to run that, like, Pleiades card, where it's just search the top 3, and if you ride that thing, you are just fucked.
Like, okay, this thing can comfortably beat anything in Tier 3 and 4. Because, like, Nova Grapplers don't like this. Aquaforce doesn't like this. Things like Pale Moon don't like it. But like in terms of actually beating decks that are good, probably not. You're not beating OTT. Actually, Witches could beat you. You're not beating Angel Feather. You're not beating Murakumo. You're not beating Shadow Paladins. Hell, you don't even beat Royal Paladins or Neonectar.
In fairness, you can beat anything that draws poorly enough, because if they don't have another grade 3 after the delete, but at that point you're relying on this, like, 1 in a million chance.
Yeah. So, that's the deck profile. Hope you can take away from it what you will. You know, it was one of the more disappointing sets or decks of the game right now. But in fairness, it's still a lot of fun. So until then, bye bye.
Bye bye.